To think like a billionaire is to see the world through a lens of possibility, strategy, and discipline, while acting broke keeps you resourceful, grounded, and hungry. The billionaires people admire did not get there by accident. They built a mindset long before they built a bank balance. Before the wealth came the behavior, and before the behavior came the belief. This audiobook invites you into that belief system. Not the flashy version that social media sells, but the authentic internal architecture, patience over urgency, value over vanity, and compounding over instant gratification. The truth is, wealth is not created by looking rich. It is created by doing the work that the rich once did in silence. In this audiobook, we will explore the dual identity behind the title, the boldness to think big, and the humility to live small. Thinking like a billionaire means expanding your time horizon, making strategic bets, and focusing on leverage instead of labor. Acting broke means resisting lifestyle inflation, avoiding the trap of signaling success, and staying committed to learning rather than performing. You will learn how to protect your time, nurture valuable relationships, scale what works, and eliminate what doesn't. You will learn the quiet skills that separate the wealthy from the merely high-earning, and you will learn how to build a mindset that multiplies your capabilities even before it multiplies your income. This is not theory for the sake of theory. This is practical psychology for anyone who wants to build power, not just status. It is about shaping a life that compounds, financially, mentally, and strategically. In this audiobook, we will break down 15 timeless principles that can shift how you think, work, and behave in your pursuit of success and freedom. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Plan in decades, execute daily. If you want to think like a billionaire, you have to respect time differently than everyone else. Not as something to pass, not as something to kill, but as the most powerful force you can work with. Wealthy thinkers don't rush the result. They don't panic when progress is slow. They build with the patience of someone who expects to still be winning 10, 20, even 30 years from now. That long horizon changes how you make decisions. When you extend your time frame, you extend your possibilities. Most people plan for the next weekend or the next vacation. Some plan for next year, but the power begins when you plan for the next decade. That's where compounding has room to breathe. That's where strategies mature. That's where identity upgrades happen. Billionaires think in decades, because decades are where leverage shows its true face. When you stretch your vision, you make decisions that are bigger, cleaner, and more intentional. But here's the other half of the equation. While you plan in decades, you execute in days. You act today. You don't wait for the perfect conditions. You don't obsess over how much is left to build. You ask, what can I do today that moves the needle even 1 inch? Because if you stretch your vision, but fail to shrink your actions, your big dreams become distant fantasies. The bridge between a large vision and a small action is consistency. When you compound small actions over long periods, the results become disproportionate to the effort. Think about how different life becomes when you don't expect everything immediately. Patience gives you permission to focus. When you're not rushing, you can choose wisely. You can play the long game that everyone else avoids, because it is not instantly rewarding. You can read a book that won't pay off until years from now. You can build a skill that won't monetize tomorrow, but will unlock freedom later. You can nurture relationships without trying to extract something from them instantly. This is how billionaires think. Long horizon, daily work. Planning in decades also forces you to confront what truly matters. If you know you will still be living with the consequences of your choices 10 years from now, you naturally eliminate the shallow activities that steal time without producing value. You stop chasing approval. You stop chasing status. you start chasing mastery and leverage. And mastery plus leverage over time becomes unstoppable. Now let's talk about the fear that sits under short-term thinking. Impatience is one of the biggest traps for aspiring achievers. They want the reward before they earn the skill. They want the applause before they build the craft. They want the outcome without the process. But money loves process. Growth loves process. Freedom loves process. When you respect the process, time becomes an ally instead of an enemy. Executing daily is your insurance against regret. You don't need to sprint every day. You just need to move. A small step taken every day beats a burst of effort followed by weeks of inactivity. People overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a decade. But a decade is built one day at a time, one email sent, one page read, one habit installed, one decision made with your future self in mind. This is how billionaires operate. They think big, they act small, and they repeat. Big vision, small steps, long timeline. It's a recipe that looks boring from the outside, but becomes extraordinary when time compounds the results. The world sees the explosion at year 10 and calls it luck. They don't see the invisible years that built the foundation. Adopt this mindset, and you'll stop chasing fast results and start building inevitable ones. Chapter 2. Be humble at the bottom, ruthless with your priorities. There's a phase in every meaningful journey when you're at the bottom. You don't have the resources, you don't have the reputation, and you don't have the leverage. You're unknown. And in that phase, humility is not just a virtue, it's a strategy. When you're humble, you learn faster, you ask better questions, you absorb knowledge that others ignore. You avoid the ego traps that force people to pretend they're further ahead than they really are. Humility at the bottom lets you stay curious instead of defensive. It lets you listen instead of perform. It allows you to seek mentors, study those who've done it before, and build skills quietly. Humble builders are dangerous because they evolve. While others are busy broadcasting their progress, humble people are accumulating it. While others are performing, humble people are preparing. The world can't see it yet, but the foundation is being laid. But humility alone is not enough. If humility is the mindset at the bottom, ruthless prioritization is the engine that gets you off the bottom. To rise, you must decide what matters, and you must eliminate what doesn't, not politely, not someday, but aggressively. Billionaire thinkers are ruthless with their priorities because they understand the cost of distraction. Every hour spent on something trivial is an hour stolen from something meaningful. Every yes given to someone else's agenda is a no stolen from your own future. The truth is, success is less about doing more and more about removing what gets in the way. It's subtraction, not addition. It's elimination, not expansion. People fantasize about adding new habits, new projects, new goals, but the real shift comes from cutting noise, cutting people who drain your energy, cutting commitments that don't align with your direction, cutting the desire to impress those who never cared to begin with. When you are at the beginning, you don't have the luxury of scattering your attention. Your attention is the most limited resource you have. Money can be lost and earned again, opportunities can return, but attention once spent never comes back. That's why ruthless prioritization matters. It converts limited attention into meaningful momentum. And here's where most fail. They want to be humble in the beginning, but they don't want to give anything up. They want success without sacrifice. They want growth without discomfort. They want new outcomes without new decisions. But prioritization forces you to choose. And choosing forces you to let something go. If everything matters, nothing matters. If everyone gets access to your time, no one gets the best of your time. Billionaire thinking is essentially a long sequence of difficult choices made with clarity instead of emotion. Being ruthless with priorities also means dealing with internal conflict, that part of you that craves instant gratification, validation or comfort. If you're honest, there's a voice inside that wants to prove yourself quickly. It wants to show progress before you've earned progress. It wants acknowledgement from the outside before you've built confidence on the inside. This is where humility protects you. Humility quiets the need to be seen. It gives you permission to build in private. It allows you to be a beginner without embarrassment. That's a powerful thing, because beginners who are unashamed learn faster than beginners who are hiding. Let's talk about the social layer. When you're at the bottom, people underestimate you, they question you, they doubt you, and sometimes they mock you. That's fine. In fact, it's useful. When no one is paying attention, you are free to make mistakes. You are free to reinvent yourself. You are free to experiment without judgment. The bottom is not a curse, it's a shield. Many people don't realize that the most expensive mistakes are made when everyone is watching. The bottom is the one time in your journey where you can fail quietly. But once you start rising, once you start building momentum, the pressure increases, expectations appear, eyes appear, opinions appear. That's why learning to prioritize early is critical. It prepares you for the phase where the world suddenly cares about your decisions. If you can't protect your priorities while you're unknown, how will you protect them once you're visible? There's another part to being ruthless with priorities, understanding that not everyone gets to come with you. Some people are compatible with who you were but not with who you are becoming. Some friends support your current reality, but not your future one. This doesn't make them bad. It simply means paths diverge. If you refuse to let them diverge, you pay the price. Many gifted people fail not because of lack of talent, but because of lack of environment. The wrong environment kills potential faster than failure ever could. Humility at the bottom keeps you learning. Ruthless prioritization keeps you moving. Combine the two, and you become unstoppable. You rise quietly, you build relentlessly, and you ignore the noise. One day people will ask how you did it. They'll assume there was a secret, but there is no secret. Just humility, focus, and the courage to choose what matters over what's easy. Chapter 3. Turn curiosity into expertise. Curiosity is the first spark of every skill, every business, every breakthrough. It begins softly, with a question, a fascination, a small pull towards something that doesn't fully make sense yet. Most people ignore that pull. They dismiss it as random interest. They choose entertainment over inquiry. But billionaire thinking treats curiosity as a compass. When something captures your attention, it's not random, it's a signal, a doorway, an invitation to explore. Expertise doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from wanting to know more than the average person and being willing to follow that desire long enough for it to compound. Curiosity is the seed. Learning is the water. Time is the sunlight. Combine all three, and you grow something valuable. If you remove curiosity, learning becomes forced and lifeless. If you remove time, learning becomes shallow and temporary. But when you keep them together, curiosity evolves into knowledge, knowledge evolves into skill, and skill evolves into expertise. Curiosity is especially powerful because it builds unfair advantages. Most people give up when something becomes difficult or confusing. They lose interest as soon as effort is required. But curiosity makes effort easier. Curiosity turns research into play and practice into discovery. That's why the most successful builders rarely seem bored with their work. They're not forcing it, they're exploring it. They're learning while others are enduring. But curiosity alone isn't enough. Curiosity must be channeled. It must be organized. It must be directed. Billionaire thinkers don't explore randomly. They explore strategically. They ask questions like, where is the world moving? What skills are becoming more valuable? What problems are worth solving? What industries are quietly growing? Curiosity without direction leads to distraction. Curiosity with direction leads to expertise. There's also a deeper layer to this. Expertise is built through obsession, not casual interest. When something fascinates you enough to think about it, after the conversation ends, after the book closes, after the video stops, that's the sign. Obsession is curiosity multiplied by time. And obsession is where personal genius lives. Every expert was once the person who just couldn't let it go. Another important piece, expertise compounds. The longer you learn about a field, the easier it becomes to learn more. Early on, every concept feels foreign. Every term requires explanation. You're building a vocabulary, you're building context, you're building a mental map. But once the map forms, new knowledge connects effortlessly. This is why beginners feel slow and experts feel fast. It's not talent, it's accumulated context. Here's where most people sabotage themselves. They interrupt curiosity. They jump from topic to topic, skill to skill, idea to idea. They never stay long enough to build depth. Depth is where value is. A shallow pool looks wide, but it can't support weight. Depth supports weight. Depth creates authority. Depth gets rewarded. In a world full of general noise, depth becomes signal. And depth doesn't just produce status. It produces leverage. When you gain expertise, you gain options. You can teach. You can build. You can advise. You can create. You can innovate. You can solve problems that other people ignore because they lack the context to see the opportunity. This is why expertise leads to wealth. Every valuable industry rewards problem solvers, and expertise equips you to solve higher-level problems. Curiosity also connects you to the right people. When you're deeply interested in something, you naturally find others who share that interest. These networks emerge organically. They become communities of learning, collaboration, and opportunity. Smart people cluster. They exchange ideas, they exchange insights, they exchange introductions. Expertise opens doors that credentials never could. But curiosity requires permission. Permission to be a beginner. Permission to ask dumb questions. Permission to chase topics others find strange. Many people kill their curiosity because they are afraid of looking uninformed. Yet the irony is simple. The unwillingness to look uninformed guarantees you stay uninformed. Billionaire thinkers embrace ignorance as a temporary stage. They don't pretend to know. They ask. They inquire. They investigate. And because they ask early, they know more later. There's another element few discuss. Curiosity protects you from stagnation. The moment you stop being curious, you stop growing. You become rigid. You become predictable. You become threatened by change instead of energized by it. Curiosity keeps you adaptable. It keeps you updated. It keeps you relevant. In a fast-changing world, relevance is a form of wealth. So how do you turn curiosity into expertise? You follow the trail long enough for it to pay dividends. You read. You experiment. You observe. You practice. You watch how the game works. You learn the language of the field. You understand what amateurs miss. And most importantly, you don't stop as soon as it becomes uncomfortable. Curiosity opens the door. Discipline walks through it. Together they create mastery. When you think like a billionaire, you don't just consume information. You accumulate it, refine it, and apply it. You become the person who knows what others don't, who sees what others overlook, and who understands what others never took the time to learn. That's how curiosity becomes expertise, and how expertise becomes power. Chapter 4. Leverage systems, not sweat. If you study how billionaires build, you'll notice something very important. They don't rely on effort alone. They don't rely on hustle alone. They don't rely on willpower alone. Those things matter, but they are not enough. Sweat by itself doesn't scale. Hard work is admirable, but it has a ceiling. Systems don't. Systems allow you to multiply effort beyond what your body and your time can produce. And that multiplication is where disproportionate wealth is created. A system is simply a repeatable method that delivers a consistent result with less human effort each time it runs. It's the opposite of improvisation. It's the opposite of grinding through the same work day after day. Think about how most people operate. Every day they wake up, start from zero, push, grind, and collapse. Next day, same process. Nothing carries over. Nothing compounds. Billionaire thinkers design their life so that the effort from yesterday makes today easier, not identical. One of the biggest mistakes people make is treating their life like a series of tasks instead of a set of systems. Tasks solve the immediate. Systems solve the ongoing. Tasks make you useful. Systems make you powerful. When you build systems, you detach output from constant manual input. That's leverage. And leverage is how you get more done in less time without burning out or falling apart. There are different forms of leverage. There's technological leverage, using tools, software, automation, and infrastructure to replace human hours. There's financial leverage, using capital to accelerate growth. There's network leverage, using relationships, teams, and partnerships to increase reach. And there's knowledge leverage, using expertise to make better decisions faster. The wealthy combine these forms so that each hour of their life produces more than 1 hour of results. But systems don't only exist in companies, they exist in personal lives too. Your habits are systems, your routines are systems, your decision frameworks are systems. Your learning process is a system, you already have systems. The question is whether they serve you or sabotage you. If you procrastinate often, that's a system. If you check your phone first thing every morning, that's a system. If you delay important projects until the last minute, that's a system. The problem is that most systems form accidentally instead of intentionally. Here's where billionaire thinking differs from everyone else. They build systems deliberately. They document processes. They refine workflows. They improve the environment around their goals. They remove friction. They simplify choices. They design life around making the right actions easier and the wrong actions harder. If the path matters, they engineer it so the path works in their favor. When you rely only on sweat, you guarantee that progress stops the moment you stop. If you get sick, progress halts. If you take a vacation, progress halts. If you lose motivation, progress halts. But when systems are running, progress continues, even when you're not actively pushing. A system is a silent worker. It doesn't need enthusiasm. It doesn't need inspiration. It just runs. People often misunderstand leverage because they think it's about laziness or avoidance. It's not. Leverage is respect for time. It's understanding the difference between labor and multiplication. It's asking a simple but transformative question: how can this create value even when I'm not directly touching it? That question forces you into better decisions. It pushes you toward tools instead of tension, toward processes instead of panic, toward structure instead of chaos. There's also a psychological component to systems. They reduce decision fatigue. When everything is a choice, life becomes mentally exhausting. Systems reduce choices. They remove uncertainty. They create predictable flow. Think about how athletes train. They don't ask themselves each morning if they should practice. They have a system. The decision is made once, and the execution repeats. That repetition is what allows mastery to emerge. The same applies to wealth creation. People who build wealth don't constantly debate where to invest their time, money, or focus. They have frameworks. They have filters. They have rules. Those rules prevent emotional decision-making and protect long-term compounding. Emotion ruins more financial opportunities than intelligence ever creates. Systems protect you from your own impulses. Building systems also requires letting go of control. That's difficult. Many people want to do everything themselves because they struggle to trust others, but control limits scale. If everything depends on you, everything is limited by you. Billionaire thinkers delegate, automate, outsource, and partner. Not because they're lazy, but because they understand their highest value role. Their goal is not to be busy, it's to be effective. And here's the final truth. Systems reward patience. You rarely see instant payoff. Sometimes it feels like extra work at the beginning. Documenting a process takes longer than doing it once. Setting up automation takes longer than doing the task manually. Training someone takes longer than handling it yourself. But systems pay you back later. And when they pay you back, they pay for a long time. Sweat creates progress. Systems create freedom. Freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom of focus. And when you combine both, when you're willing to sweat to build the system and patient enough to let it scale, you unlock a level of productivity and wealth that hustle alone could never produce. This is how billionaires build, not by working harder than everyone else, but by building systems that keep working even when they don't. Chapter 5. Spend less than you earn, even when you earn more. There is a phase in wealth building where you have to survive, and a later phase where you have to behave. Most people never master the second one. They start earning more, and immediately start spending more. They upgrade lifestyle, they upgrade status, they upgrade convenience, and without realizing it, they upgrade their dependency on money. The trap isn't poverty, the trap is lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation keeps people looking successful and feeling broke. Billionaire thinkers avoid that trap by design. One of the most powerful wealth principles is embarrassingly simple: spend less than you earn. It sounds basic, almost too basic to matter, yet it's the foundation for every fortune ever built. There is no wealth without margin. Margin is the space between income and expenses. Margin creates savings. Savings create capital. Capital creates investments, and investments create freedom. That sequence is non-negotiable. You cannot shortcut it. You cannot hack it. You must respect the order. Here's what makes billionaire thinking different. They keep the margin even when income grows. They don't fall for the "I deserve it" mentality. They don't use money as validation. They don't treat income as an excuse for consumption. When their income increases, their lifestyle doesn't. They act broke. They maintain humility. They stay careful, disciplined and observant. They let money accumulate instead of evaporate. Income without discipline is a setup for disappointment. There are doctors, lawyers, executives, and high-earning professionals who make 6 or 7 figures a year, yet live paycheck to paycheck, because their spending always expands to match their earnings. Earning more doesn't solve spending problems. It amplifies them. That's why so many people feel exhausted by money, even when they make a lot of it. They are financially busy, but financially fragile. People hate hearing about frugality, because they associate it with deprivation. But frugality isn't about deprivation. It's about control. It's about buying options. It's about buying time. It's about buying the ability to walk away from bad deals, bad jobs, and bad environments. When you spend everything you make, you lose negotiation power. When you keep a margin, you gain leverage. Wealthy thinkers don't save for emergencies. They save for opportunities. Emergencies drain you. Opportunities elevate you, but you only recognize the difference when you have capital to deploy. Another reason billionaire thinkers act broke is psychological. The moment you start signaling wealth through cars, clothes, gadgets, or lifestyle, you attract unnecessary attention and expectations. You attract judgment. You attract comparison. You attract the pressure to maintain an image. That pressure becomes financial gravity. It pulls you down even as you try to rise. The truly wealthy avoid that gravity by being understated. They let their money work, not their ego. Let's talk about the ego piece for a moment. The ego wants proof. It wants validation. It wants visible evidence that you're doing better. And the fastest way to produce visible evidence is to spend. It's easy to buy a nicer car. It's easy to upgrade the apartment. It's easy to travel more, and the world will applaud you for it. But applause is not wealth. Applause is consumption. The ego wants applause. The investor wants freedom. Pick one. Billionaire thinkers also understand cycles. There will be seasons of abundance and seasons of scarcity. If you spend like the good season never ends, the bad season becomes catastrophic. If you spend modestly during the good season, the bad season becomes manageable, and sometimes even profitable. Many fortunes were built during downturns, simply because the wealthy had capital, when others were desperate. Acting broke during the good times gives you that advantage. There's also a creativity benefit to acting broke. When you limit unnecessary spending, you become resourceful. You explore alternative strategies. You negotiate. You improvise. You build instead of buy. Creativity is a muscle that weakens when convenience is overused. Billionaire thinkers preserve that muscle by not flooding their life with ease prematurely. But discipline doesn't mean you never enjoy anything. It means you enjoy things with intention instead of impulse. It means you distinguish between consumption that enhances life and consumption that distracts from life. It means you delay indulgence until indulgence doesn't cost you anything emotionally or financially. The difference between "I want it now" and "I want it later" is wealth. And here's the important truth. No one is impressed by your spending, except people who are also trapped by spending. People with real wealth admire restraint, not excess. They admire durability, not flash. They admire those who build quietly, not those who perform loudly. When you truly internalize that, spending loses its power over you. So yes, spend less than you earn, but more importantly, continue spending less than you earn, even as that earn increases. That discipline is how wealth escapes gravity. It's how capital accumulates. It's how opportunity becomes accessible. And it's how you avoid the exhausting cycle of looking rich while staying broke. Act broke long enough, and eventually you won't have to act anymore. The wealth will be real, the freedom will be real, and the life will be yours, not rented from lifestyle inflation. Chapter 6. Beat on asymmetric opportunities. If you want to think like a billionaire, you have to change how you evaluate risk. Most people evaluate risk through fear. Billionaire thinkers evaluate risk through math. And the math they pay attention to is asymmetric math. Small downside, big upside. They don't chase opportunities where the reward equals the risk. They chase opportunities where the reward dramatically outweighs the risk. That's the game. That's the secret. That's how fortunes are built without gambling everything away. An asymmetric opportunity is one where you can lose a little but potentially gain a lot. In other words, small bets with disproportionate upside. That could look like investing early in a new idea, trying a side business with low starting cost, learning a skill that opens high-value doors, or making introductions that cost nothing but create future advantage. Asymmetric thinking asks a simple question: what is the upside, and what does it really cost me to try? Most people never ask that question. They only ask, what if it doesn't work? So they miss opportunities that would have changed their life. We often imagine billionaires as gigantic risk-takers, but in reality, they are careful risk managers. They avoid symmetrical risk, where losing hurts as much as winning helps. If the downside is catastrophic, they walk away. They don't risk the foundations, they risk the excess. They risk the optional. That's why they appear bold without being reckless. They aren't smarter than everyone else. They are just more selective about the games they choose to play. There's another layer to asymmetric opportunities: timing. If you are early to a trend, early to an industry, early to a skill, early to a network, the upside multiplies. Late adopters miss that advantage. But here's the twist: you can't benefit from early opportunities if you require certainty. Certainty only appears when the upside is already priced in. By the time everyone agrees it's a good idea, the reward has already been distributed. Billionaire thinkers are comfortable acting before validation arrives. But asymmetric thinking is not only about money, it applies to knowledge. One book can change the way you make decisions for the rest of your life. Massive upside. One conversation with the right person can redirect your career. Massive upside. One new habit can increase your energy, discipline, or confidence for decades. Massive upside. And what's the downside? A few hours, a little discomfort, a little effort. That's asymmetric. The reason most people miss these opportunities is because they have the wrong definition of cost. They think cost is money. But cost also includes time, attention, energy, and reputation. And in many asymmetric situations, the monetary cost is small but the psychological cost feels large. Reaching out to a mentor costs nothing in money, but it costs you vulnerability. Starting a side project costs little money, but it costs you patience. Learning a skill costs no dollars, but it costs you consistency. Many people reject asymmetric upside because they dislike the discomfort more than they value the reward. Another key piece of asymmetric thinking is portfolio behavior. Billionaires don't rely on one bet. They place many small bets across many possibilities, knowing that some will fail, some will break even, and a few will outperform everything else. Those few are the ones that change their life. Failure is expected. Failure is priced in. They don't need to be right all the time. They just need to be right big once in a while. In contrast, most people place one big emotional bet on a single path. If it fails, they collapse. Their strategy is fragile. They need every decision to work perfectly. Billionaire thinking is the opposite, robust and diversified. The downside is controlled. The upside is encouraged. This is why asymmetric thinkers are not paralyzed by uncertainty. Uncertainty is where the payoff hides. There's also a wealth of asymmetric opportunity hiding in modern times. The cost of creating, building, and experimenting has collapsed. You can build brands, products, media, skills, and networks without needing corporate permission or gatekeeper approval. That didn't exist a few decades ago. The upside is global. The downside is minimal. Yet most people still behave as if failure is fatal. They underestimate how cheap experimentation has become. To apply asymmetric thinking, you must adopt a different question set. Instead of what if it doesn't work, ask what if it does. Instead of how do I avoid failure, ask what failure can I afford. Instead of how do I get guaranteed results, ask how do I give myself multiple chances to win. These questions open doors that fear keeps shut. And finally, asymmetric thinking requires identity flexibility. You must be willing to try things you're not good at yet. You must be willing to learn in public, fail in private, and attempt without applause. You must be willing to experiment with no guarantee of praise. That's uncomfortable. That's what stops most people. But the people who push through discomfort get access to upside that comfort will never offer. Betting on asymmetric opportunities doesn't mean chasing every idea. It means recognizing the few ideas that are worth more than they cost, acting on them repeatedly, and letting time and compounding do the heavy lifting. That's how billionaires think. Not with reckless risk, but with strategic asymmetry. Chapter 7. Guard your time like it's your net worth. One of the biggest distinctions between how the wealthy think and how everyone else thinks is how they treat time. To the average person, time feels abundant and money feels scarce. To billionaire thinkers, it's the opposite. Money can be made, lost, replaced, multiplied, and recovered. Time cannot. Once spent, it's gone forever. That shift in perspective changes everything. What you say yes to, what you tolerate, how you schedule your life, and how you protect your attention from erosion. Time is the only asset every human receives in equal amounts. 24 hours, no matter who you are. The difference is not in how much time people have, but in how they spend it. Some spend time to save money. Others spend money to save time. That trade-off reveals mindset. When you value time more highly, you stop chasing minor savings and start chasing major opportunities. You stop doing tasks you can outsource for cheap and start focusing on the work that actually moves your life forward. Guarding your time starts with awareness. How many hours each week are truly being invested toward your goals versus simply consumed by distractions, errands, obligations, or other people's priorities? Most people have no idea. Time slips away in tiny fragments. 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, an hour lost scrolling, a day lost reacting. Billionaire thinkers don't allow time to leak unnoticed. They track it. They allocate it. They respect it. They defend it. There's a phrase worth remembering. Everything has a cost, even free things. Free entertainment costs attention. Free conversations cost focus. Free favors cost energy. Free invitations cost time away from your mission. The currency might not be money, but the invoice always arrives. When you begin to view time as a currency, you start asking better questions. Is this worth the hours it will cost me? Is this worth delaying my goals? Is this an investment or an expense? This alone can transform your life. To guard your time, you also have to guard your calendar. A calendar is not just a place to store appointments, it's a declaration of priorities. If your calendar is full of tasks that don't matter, you've already lost. If your calendar is empty because everything is handled reactively, you've also lost. Wealthy thinkers don't let other people fill their schedules for them. They proactively carve out time for building, thinking, learning, and strategizing. They treat those blocks of time as sacred, not flexible. Guarding your time requires saying no more often, and not politely, maybe later type of no's, real no's, clear no's, direct no's. You cannot protect time without disappointing some people. You cannot pursue something meaningful while trying to satisfy everyone. Billionaire thinkers know that priorities require sacrifice. You sacrifice approval for progress. You sacrifice social ease for focused work. People who avoid discomfort lose their time to other people's agendas. But guarding your time goes beyond scheduling and boundaries. It also applies to mental bandwidth. Mental bandwidth is the processing power you have available for solving problems, learning, and creativity. Terrible uses of mental bandwidth include worrying about things you can't control, arguing about trivial topics, trying to impress people who don't matter, rehashing old stories, and reliving old conflicts. All of those drain cognitive resources that could have been allocated to building something meaningful. Billionaire thinkers don't waste mental energy on low-value thinking. They keep their minds focused on what they can control, what they can improve, and what they can build. There's a powerful shift that happens when you guard your time. Your standards rise. You stop tolerating lateness, disorganization, chaos, drama, and inefficiency. You stop agreeing to endless small commitments. You stop being available by default. You begin treating your time with the same seriousness you treat your health or your finances. And that seriousness compounds. Others notice. Some resist. Some adjust. And eventually your environment calibrates to your expectations. But here's an important part. Guarding your time isn't just about cutting. It's also about optimizing. It's about designing life around what produces the greatest return. Sometimes that means batching tasks. Sometimes that means outsourcing small tasks so you can focus on high-impact work. Sometimes it means buying convenience to reclaim your schedule. Sometimes it means delegating, automating, or hiring. You're not trying to be busy, you're trying to be effective. And effectiveness requires concentration, focus, depth. Billionaire thinkers don't try to juggle 10 important things at once. They block time for deep work. They eliminate interruptions. They don't answer every notification, email, or message the moment it appears. They choose windows of communication rather than constant availability. Constant availability is the enemy of high-level thinking. If your attention is always fragmented, your results will always be average. Guard your time, and your results will change. Guard your attention, and your identity will change. Guard your calendar, and your future will change. When you realize time is wealth, you begin investing it instead of spending it. And when you invest time into learning, building, connecting, and creating, life compounds in ways that feel unfair to those who never learned how to protect their most valuable asset. Chapter 8. Build relationships that compound. There is a point in life where hard work alone stops moving the needle. You can be talented, disciplined, intelligent, and relentless. But if you're isolated, your ceiling arrives fast. Billionaire thinkers understand something essential. Relationships are leverage. The right relationships expand your reach, accelerate your learning, and multiply your opportunities. The wrong relationships drain time, dilute focus, and trap you in cycles that never scale. The wealthy don't network to collect contacts. They build alliances that compound over time. Compounding in relationships works the same way compounding works in finance. Small interactions, consistently invested, grow into trust. Trust grows into collaboration. Collaboration grows into opportunity, and opportunity grows into wealth. Not always financial wealth, but definitely strategic wealth. Every major career breakthrough you've ever seen had a relational component. Someone opened a door, someone made an introduction, someone vouched for someone, someone taught someone something they couldn't have learned alone. But compounding only begins when relationships have time to mature. Most people approach relationships with impatience. They want instant favors, instant access, instant benefits. They treat people like vending machines. Insert small talk, expect a payout. That's not how this works. The wealthy play a long game with people. They invest without immediate expectation. They lead with value before asking for value in return. They build reputational equity. Reputational equity is a hidden form of capital. It means that when your name comes up in a room, you aren't in. People speak well of you. They describe you as reliable, competent, generous, helpful, consistent. That reputation travels further than any resume ever could. In powerful rooms, reputational equity decides who gets introduced, who gets invited, and who gets trusted. Billionaire thinkers protect their reputation because they know trust multiplies faster than money. Building relationships that compound requires intention. First, you have to choose the environments you enter. Proximity is power. If you surround yourself with people who are stagnant, complacent, and comfortable, you eventually adopt their standards. But if you surround yourself with builders, learners, creators, and ambitious minds, their momentum pulls you forward. Human beings adapt to the standards of their peers. If you raise the standards of the people around you, you automatically raise your own. Second, billionaire thinkers don't seek relationships based on status. They seek relationships based on alignment. Alignment of values, alignment of goals, alignment of ambition. Alignment doesn't mean identical paths. It means shared direction. A high performer in one domain can uplift a high performer in another domain, even if their industries don't overlap. What matters is shared seriousness toward growth. Third, they understand contribution. Relationships that compound are built through contribution, not consumption. When you enter relationships with the mindset of how can I help, instead of what can I get, you differentiate yourself quickly. Most people never ask how they can contribute. They ask how they can benefit. But contribution creates goodwill, and goodwill creates compounding. Contribution can take different forms. Sometimes it's knowledge, sharing a resource, a book, a strategy, or an experience. Sometimes it's connection, making introductions that create mutual benefit. Sometimes it's encouragement, reminding someone of their strengths. Sometimes it's collaboration, building something together. The key is that contribution plants seeds that can sprout later in surprising ways. Fourth, billionaire thinkers avoid relational debt, the habit of taking more than you give. Relational debt makes people feel used, not valued. And once someone feels used, the compound interest of trust collapses. The wealthy play clean relationship games. They don't exploit, they don't manipulate, they don't take shortcuts through people. Their compounding depends on integrity. Another important element of compounding relationships is filtering. Not every relationship should be nurtured. Some relationships are anchors disguised as friendships. Some relationships reward your old identity, not your new one. Some relationships are based on proximity, not alignment. And some relationships feel good, but go nowhere. You have to develop the discernment to know who belongs in your future and who belongs in your past. And here's the paradox. As you grow, your circle shrinks before it expands. You shed people who resist growth before you attract those who accelerate it. That shrinking period feels lonely, but loneliness during transition is not failure, it's preparation. The wrong circle has to exit before the right circle can enter. Finally, billionaire thinkers understand the power of invisible rooms. The most important conversations about your future will be held in rooms you are not present in. Invitations are extended in those rooms. Deals are conceived in those rooms. Decisions are influenced in those rooms. Your behavior today determines what is said about you in those rooms. Years from now, every interaction contributes to that future reputation. Networking is transactional. Compounding relationships are transformational. Networking is collecting people. Compounding relationships is growing with people. Networking is short-term. Compounding is long-term. When you play the compounding game, you don't just accumulate contacts, you accumulate allies. If you want to think like a billionaire, treat people as long-term investments. Protect your reputation. Contribute first. Align with builders. Filter wisely, and remember, money compounds fastest in the hands of those whose relationships compound even faster. Chapter 9. Think value, not vanity. When people start earning or achieving, the temptation to chase vanity becomes very strong. Vanity wants to be seen, admired, and applauded. Value wants to be useful, effective, and enduring. Billionaire thinkers choose value. They build their life around what creates value, not what signals status. And that single distinction separates those who quietly accumulate wealth from those who loudly accumulate expenses. Vanity is about impressing others. Value is about improving others, or improving a system, a product, a process, or a skill. Vanity asks, how can I look successful? Value asks, how can I make something better? You can fake vanity, you cannot fake value. Vanity fades quickly, value compounds quietly, and the marketplace over the long horizon always rewards value. Thinking in terms of value changes how you behave. When you focus on value, you become a learner, you become a builder, you become someone who seeks to understand how things work instead of merely how things appear. When you focus on vanity, you become a performer, you become a consumer. You start optimizing for image instead of capability. The funny thing is, vanity feels satisfying in the short term, while value feels slow. But fast satisfaction is rarely durable, and durable wealth is rarely fast. Consider the difference between buying an expensive watch to impress strangers versus investing that same money into a skill that could multiply your income for the next 20 years. The watch signals something superficial. The skill produces something substantial. Only one of them will matter a decade from now, and it won't be the watch. But millions of people choose the watch because validation is addictive and quiet growth is boring. Vanity thrives on comparison, comparing houses, cars, salaries, followers, addresses, vacations and brands. Value thrives on contribution. How much you learned, how much you improved, how much you built, and how much you helped. One is external, one is internal. When your life is guided by external comparisons, you become trapped. There will always be someone with more status, more symbols, more applause. There is no finish line, but when you live by internal contribution, the game becomes winnable, growth becomes fulfilling. Progress becomes measurable. Billionaire thinkers do not spend their time trying to impress those who have no influence over their destiny. They don't purchase validation from strangers. They don't waste their energy proving their worth. They invest their energy improving their worth. That's the difference between vanity and value. Vanity wants recognition without results. Value wants results even without recognition. Vanity also hides insecurity. It tries to signal strength instead of building it. It tries to signal wealth instead of accumulating it. It tries to signal confidence instead of developing it. Vanity is a costume, value is character, and character is what remains when the costume is removed. Now let's talk about markets. The marketplace, whether in business, careers or entrepreneurship, pays for value, not for status, not for aesthetic, not for ego. It pays for solutions, competence, reliability, innovation and results. If you can do something others can't, or if you can do it better, faster, or cheaper, you'll be paid. If you can't, you won't, regardless of how impressive you appear. This is why billionaire thinkers obsess over increasing their value, rather than increasing their vanity. Value can take many forms. It can be technical skill, it can be judgment, it can be creativity, it can be leadership, it can be decision-making, it can be emotional intelligence, it can be reputation, it can be courage, but it always requires one thing: investment. You cannot manifest value. You cannot posture value. You must build it. Vanity feels urgent. Value feels patient. Vanity is hungry for attention. Value is hungry for mastery. Vanity wants an audience. Value wants an edge. And if you choose value consistently enough, eventually you get both, the edge and the audience. Vanity, on the other hand, may get you the audience, but not the edge. And without the edge, the audience eventually leaves. The pursuit of value also changes how you purchase. When you think in vanity, you buy to display. When you think in value, you buy to enhance. You start asking better questions. Does this tool make me more effective? Does this course increase my earning power? Does this hire free up my time? Does this book improve my thinking? Purchases become investments instead of distractions, and investments are what create wealth. As you rise, you will notice that vanity is loud while value is quiet. The loudness is the trap. The quietness is the advantage. People showing off are often signaling the absence of something. People building quietly are usually accumulating something. The wealthy learn early that the less you need to signal, the stronger you actually are. Thinking in value instead of vanity is not just a financial principle, it's an identity principle. It shapes who you become. It shapes how you spend your days. It shapes how you make decisions under pressure. And over years, those decisions compound. They compound into competence. They compound into trust. They compound into opportunities that vanity will never access. If you choose value, you might be underestimated in the beginning. But if you choose vanity, you will be exposed in the end. The path of value demands humility early and rewards you later. The path of vanity rewards you early and humbles you later. Choose wisely. Chapter 10. Turn rejection into leverage. One of the most misunderstood resources in life is rejection. Most people treat it as an insult, a failure, or a sign to quit. Billionaire thinkers treat rejection as feedback, as information, and as leverage. They understand that rejection isn't the end of the path, it's the path. The world rarely hands out yes on the first attempt. The bigger the opportunity, the more resistance you will meet on the way to it. Rejection is simply confirmation that you're moving in the right direction towards something difficult, something scarce, something valuable. Rejection hurts because it bruises the ego. The ego wants approval, validation, applause, and immediate confirmation. But the market doesn't care about your ego. The market cares about value. When you are rejected, it might mean you haven't built enough skill yet, or enough resilience, or enough credibility, or enough consistency. Or maybe you aimed at the wrong person, the wrong timing, or the wrong strategy. Rejection carries information if you're willing to observe it instead of internalize it. But here's the crucial point. Rejection is not a verdict. It's data, and data can be used. You can learn from it, you can adapt from it, and you can improve because of it. Every builder, every entrepreneur, every achiever you admire became who they are not because they avoided rejection, but because they extracted value from it. They let rejection sharpen them instead of soften them. They treated rejection as tuition, not trauma. Billionaire thinkers also understand that rejection is a filter. It filters out the uncommitted, the impatient, and the easily discouraged. If everyone got easy access to opportunities, those opportunities would not be valuable. Scarcity is what makes something worth pursuing. Rejection is the mechanism that maintains that scarcity. You cannot remove rejection from an achievement without removing the achievement itself. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you stop fearing rejection. You become proactive. You ask for things. You reach out. You initiate. You make offers. You suggest collaborations. You pitch ideas. You apply for roles. You introduce yourself. You take shots. And the more shots you take, the more upside you create. Most opportunities never happen, not because people aren't capable, but because they never ask. They're trying to avoid the sting of rejection, so they reject themselves in advance. They call it caution, but it's avoidance. Billionaire thinkers don't pre-reject themselves. Another powerful reframe is understanding that rejection carries directional signals. Not all rejection means no forever. Sometimes it means not yet. Sometimes it means try another approach. Sometimes it means aim somewhere else. Timing matters. Strategy matters. Fit matters. If one door closes, that doesn't mean the building doesn't exist. It means you need another entrance. Persistence in strategy beats persistence in stubbornness. The path to leverage lies in how you respond after rejection. Most people retreat. They shrink. They withdraw. They tell themselves stories. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should lower my expectations. Those stories become self-fulfilling. Billionaire thinkers write different stories. After rejection, they ask constructive questions. What can I learn? What can I change? Who can help? Where else can I try? They use rejection as a mirror, not as a cage. Some of the highest leverage opportunities in life only appear after rejection forces you to look somewhere else. Rejection can push you into better industries, better markets, better people, and better timing. Many careers that seem linear were actually shaped by closed doors that redirected someone to something better. But you only benefit from that redirection if you're willing to keep moving after the door shuts. Rejection also builds resilience, and resilience multiplies value. When you've been rejected enough times, you stop taking it personally. You detach your identity from the outcome. You stop equating rejection with worth. That detachment becomes a superpower because it frees you from performance anxiety. It frees you from perfectionism. It frees you from the need for approval. Once you're no longer controlled by rejection, you become dangerous in the best possible way. You can attempt what others avoid. There's also an economic reason why rejection becomes leverage. The world rewards those who keep moving after hearing no. The marketplace is full of quitters, full of people who gave up after the first negative response, full of people who mistook discouragement for destiny. If you simply outlast discouragement, you rise by default. If you outlearn and outadapt along the way, you rise even faster. But let's add one more layer. Rejection teaches negotiation. When someone says no, it's often a negotiation point. Maybe they need more information. Maybe they need more proof. Maybe they need a different offer structure. Maybe the timing is off. Maybe the risk feels too high. Rejection invites curiosity. What would need to change for this to become a yes? That question alone has unlocked millions in deals, partnerships, and career opportunities. People who never ask it never discover that a no often contains the blueprint for a yes. Final thought. Rejection is uncomfortable, but so is stagnation. One hurts now, the other hurts forever. One creates resilience, the other creates regret. Billionaire thinkers choose the discomfort that leads to leverage. They don't avoid rejection, they weaponize it. They let it strengthen their strategy, sharpen their skills, and stretch their courage. And in the end, rejection becomes not something they fear, but something they use. Chapter 11. Play the invisible game. Everyone else ignores. There are two games happening in life at all times: the visible game and the invisible game. The visible game is what everyone talks about: titles, status, followers, awards, public achievements, visible progress, and obvious wins. The invisible game is everything underneath: patience, discipline, restraint, quiet preparation, accumulated knowledge, long-term strategy, and decisions made when no one is watching. Billionaire thinkers win, not because they dominate the visible game, but because they master the invisible one. The invisible game begins with patience. While most people demand fast validation, billionaire thinkers allow time to work in their favor. They don't rush to announce every idea. They don't broadcast every move. They don't seek applause during the build phase. They understand that silence during development gives them freedom to experiment without being judged prematurely. When you keep your early moves invisible, you protect your momentum from outside influence. You're less likely to quit when you're not being watched. Another part of the invisible game is restraint. Restraint is the ability to not react impulsively, to not chase every shiny distraction, to not get pulled into emotional battles, to not argue for the sake of ego, and to not waste time proving yourself to people who don't matter. Restraint looks passive on the surface, but it's incredibly strategic. It's the skill of choosing your battles and protecting your energy. In many cases, victory goes not to the loudest, but to the most self-controlled. Then there's strategic silence. Silence is underrated because the world is noisy. Everyone is broadcasting, signaling, posting, and performing. But the more you talk, the more information you give away, and in competitive arenas, business, negotiation, relationships or career, information is leverage. Billionaire thinkers know that silence is not emptiness, it's positioning. Sometimes you gain more by not revealing your plans, not reacting publicly, and not explaining your strategy. Silence buys time. Silence hides vulnerabilities. Silence protects intent. Timing is another invisible component. Two people can execute the same strategy, with wildly different outcomes depending on timing. Billionaire thinkers are patient enough to wait for the window, when the market is ready, when the people are ready, when the opportunity is ripe. They don't force outcomes, they prepare, they observe, and they strike when conditions are advantageous. The average person is either too early, because they're impatient, or too late because they waited for certainty. The wealthy accept uncertainty, but refuse impatience. The invisible game also includes information. While many play based on opinions, billionaire thinkers play based on knowledge, data, patterns and history. They study what others ignore. They connect dots others never see. They understand how industries evolve, how incentives shape behavior, how power moves, and how systems break. Information compounds just like money, and the invisible accumulation of understanding is often what separates the one who plays from the one who wins. Another element of the invisible game is reputation, not the public reputation that vanity chases, but private reputation. Public reputation is how strangers see you. Private reputation is how powerful people speak about you when you're not in the room. Public reputation gets applause. Private reputation gets opportunities. And private reputation is built through integrity, reliability, consistency, and strategic restraint. It grows slowly in the shadows and shows itself only when it matters. The invisible game also rewards emotional regulation. If you can stay calm when others panic, if you can stay level when others brag, if you can stay focused when others are distracted, you gain an unfair advantage. Emotional maturity is a form of leverage. It prevents burnout. It prevents costly mistakes. It prevents self-sabotage. The people who crumble under pressure usually lose, not because they lacked talent, but because they lacked composure. Another misunderstood aspect is long-term thinking. Long-term thinking is invisible because the results don't show immediately. It feels unproductive in the beginning. You read books now to make better decisions years later. You build relationships now to unlock opportunities years later. You develop skills now to create leverage years later. The visible world rewards short-term performance. The invisible world rewards long-term compounding. There's also the non-obvious truth that most breakthroughs happen privately before they happen publicly. Confidence is built privately. Confidence is built privately. Creativity is developed privately. Strategy is refined privately. When the results finally appear, people assume they happened overnight. But nothing meaningful happens overnight. It only becomes visible overnight. To play the invisible game well, you must also detach from the urge to constantly prove yourself. When you need validation, you rush. When you don't need validation, you build. The invisible game frees you from the noise of comparison and the pressure of performance. You no longer compete for attention, you compete for advantage. And advantage accumulates quietly. When billionaire thinkers finally make a visible move, launching a project, pitching a deal, entering a market, or revealing a solution, it looks effortless because all the effort happened behind the scenes. The invisible game made the visible result look inevitable. Play the visible game alone, and you'll burn out competing for attention. Play the invisible game well, and the visible wins take care of themselves. Chapter 12. Create multiple engines of cash flow. There is a point on the path to wealth where earning more from a single source stops being enough. You can have a great job, a great business, or a great skill, but if your income depends on one engine, you are one disruption away from starting over. Billionaire thinkers don't treat income as a single stream. They treat it as an ecosystem. They build multiple engines of cash flow, some active, some passive, some slow, some fast, some foundational, some opportunistic. This is how they make their wealth durable instead of fragile. Most people are taught to chase a better job, not a better system of income. They are taught to depend on salary instead of depend on strategy. Salary feels safe because it's predictable, but it's also vulnerable because it's singular. One decision from a boss, one downturn in the industry, one shift in demand, and the engine stalls. Billionaire thinkers remove this vulnerability by building redundancy into their financial life. They don't rely on a single pillar. They build a structure supported by many. There are three major types of income engines: earned income, leveraged income, and passive income. Earned income comes from your time. You perform a task and get paid. This is where most people live. It's limited by hours, energy, and availability. Leveraged income comes from systems. You set up a process, a product, or a platform, and it scales without your constant effort. Passive income comes from assets, investments, rentals, royalties, dividends, equity, or digital property that pay you even when you're asleep. Billionaire thinkers aim to move from earned to leverage to passive over time. But diversification doesn't mean doing everything at once. It doesn't mean chasing 10 side projects or building a dozen businesses overnight. It means that after one engine is stable, you begin building the next. It means that while one income stream pays the bills, another is being developed to pay for the future. It means patience. It means sequencing. Most people fail not because they don't diversify, but because they diversify too early before they have mastery in anything. Billionaire thinkers concentrate first, then expand. Another advantage of multiple income engines is compounding. When you have only one stream, all surplus income from that stream often gets consumed. But when you have multiple streams, one can fund another. For example, earned income can fund investments. Investments can fund dividends. Dividends can fund new ventures. New ventures can fund assets. Assets can fund freedom. The engine feeds the ecosystem, and the ecosystem feeds your independence. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you begin building multiple streams. You stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an owner. Owners build assets. Owners think long-term. Owners expect to build something once and get paid repeatedly. That shift alone can change your financial trajectory because owners prioritize activities with exponential potential instead of linear exchange. But let's address something practical. Not every stream is financial at first. Some streams start as skills. Some streams start as relationships. Some streams start as expertise. Skills can be monetized. Relationships can generate opportunities. Expertise can attract demand. Billionaire thinkers treat these as pre-income assets, assets that don't pay immediately, but become the foundation for future engines. The average person quits prematurely because they expect instant money. Builders persist because they understand sequencing. Another layer to this idea is asymmetric payoff. Many side engines don't need to make a fortune to matter. Even a small additional income stream can change everything. It provides breathing room. It provides optionality. It provides stability. It reduces desperation. Desperation kills negotiation power. When you have one engine, you will often say yes to things you shouldn't, because you can't afford to say no. With multiple engines, you negotiate from strength instead of fear. We should also discuss the role of technology. Digital infrastructure has made building new income engines cheaper than ever. You can create products without a factory. You can sell services without an office. You can distribute content without a publisher. You can build an audience without a media company. You can invest without a financial advisor. If you don't take advantage of this era, someone else will. But multiple income streams require something else: patience without visibility. When you're building a second or third engine, it often doesn't pay immediately. There are months where it feels pointless. There are months where progress is invisible. This is the point where most people abandon the engine and return to the comfort of their primary income. Billionaire thinkers don't abandon the build phase just because the payoff isn't instant. They know a slow engine today can become a powerful engine tomorrow. Finally, multiple income engines weren't designed for luxury. They were designed for freedom. Freedom from dependency, freedom from fear, freedom from pressure, and freedom from scarcity. Money is not the ultimate goal, independence is. When you build income that arrives from multiple directions, on multiple timelines, through multiple mechanisms, you stop worrying about survival and start thinking about strategy. You move from playing defense to playing offense. And offense is where wealth compounds. If you want to think like a billionaire, don't chase a higher paycheck. Build a stronger ecosystem. The engines you build outside your main income are the engines that eventually set you free. Chapter 13. Scale what works, kill what doesn't. There comes a point in every pursuit where effort alone stops being the bottleneck and decision-making becomes the true differentiator. The average person believes success is about doing more tasks, more projects, more experimentation. Billionaire thinkers know success is about doing less, but doing it better. They scale what works, and they ruthlessly kill what doesn't. They don't drag dead weight across years of their life, hoping it magically becomes profitable, meaningful, or fulfilling. They analyze, they measure, they adjust, and they move. Scaling what works sounds obvious, yet very few people do it. When something goes well, most people celebrate briefly and then chase something new. They let boredom, ego, or novelty bias distract them from exploiting the opportunity already in their hands. Billionaire thinkers behave differently. When something works, they pour gasoline on it, they invest in it, they refine it, they optimize it, they delegate surrounding tasks, they find leverage points. They ask, how can this go bigger, faster, wider, deeper? Scaling is the process of letting success compound. If one product sells, launch more versions. If one skill earns money, package it into different forms. If one connection leads to an opportunity, nurture that relationship into multiple opportunities. Scaling is about multiplying what already shows promise, instead of forever searching for brand new ideas. But scaling is only half the formula. The other half is killing what doesn't work, decisively, cleanly, and early enough to protect resources. This is where most people struggle, because killing something that isn't working feels like admitting defeat. It feels like wasted time, wasted money, wasted effort. So they hold on. They justify. They rationalize. They tell themselves it just needs a little more time, or a little more luck, or a little more belief. Months turn into years, and the sunk cost fallacy traps them in mediocrity. Billionaire thinkers escape this trap by ignoring sunk costs and focusing on future return. To kill what doesn't work, you must separate identity from strategy. If you tie your identity to a business, a project, a degree, a career, or a path, you will defend it long after it stops serving you. The wealthy don't marry a single strategy, they marry the mission. Strategies are tools, not identities. When a tool stops working, they drop it and pick another. That agility gives them unfair advantage in fast-changing environments. Another important distinction: killing what doesn't work doesn't mean quitting at the first sign of difficulty. Billionaire thinkers can tell the difference between friction and failure. Friction means hard but meaningful. Failure means unviable. One requires endurance. The other requires decision-making. Knowing the difference is one of the most valuable entrepreneurial instincts you can build. The question becomes, how do you know when to scale and when to kill? You measure, you observe feedback. You study results. You track inputs and outputs. You watch patterns. You consult people with distance who can see what your bias blinds you to. Wealthy thinkers make decisions based on performance, not emotion. Here's a simple principle: if something shows positive asymmetry, small input, large output, scale it. If something shows negative asymmetry, large input, small output, kill it. The marketplace rewards this logic in every domain. Scale strengths, retire weaknesses. Double down on winners, cut losers. If a product sells with no marketing, scale it. If a marketing strategy converts well, scale it. If a relationship produces opportunities, nurture it. If a platform rewards your content, post more. If a skill pays you well, sharpen it further. Most people do the opposite. They keep trying to fix what doesn't work because they're emotionally attached to the investment. They try to convince the world to want something the world doesn't want. But the market does not care about how hard you worked. It doesn't care about how much you believe. It cares about demand, value, and alignment. Scaling also requires operational changes. When something begins to work, new constraints appear. You need processes, delegation, automation, or outsourcing. You need to remove bottlenecks. You need to define standards. You need to focus on leverage instead of brute force. Billionaire thinkers don't scale chaos, they scale order. And here's a critical nuance: scaling isn't just for business, it applies to life. If a habit improves your energy, scale it. If a mentor elevates your thinking, spend more time with them. If a morning routine increases focus, protect it. If a boundary creates peace, reinforce it. Life compounds when you scale what elevates you and eliminate what drains you. Killing what doesn't work also applies to identity layers. If a version of yourself is no longer compatible with the life you want, you let that version die. Growth requires shedding. People who refuse to shed stay stuck in outdated identities that limit their options. Billionaire thinkers reinvent deliberately, not impulsively, not reactively, but strategically. Finally, scaling and killing are not one-time actions, they're continuous. The world evolves, markets evolve, technology evolves, you evolve. What works today might not work tomorrow. Chapter 14. Build a life that outlasts you. At some point, on the path of achievement, the goal stops being about accumulation and starts being about continuation. Billionaire thinkers understand that wealth without longevity is fragile. Success without contribution is incomplete. And a life that ends only with your final breath is a life that missed its ultimate potential. To build a life that outlasts you is to build beyond survival, beyond vanity, beyond consumption, into legacy. Legacy doesn't start with money. Legacy starts with intention. It starts with asking deeper questions. What am I building that continues when I'm no longer here to run it? Whose life will be better because I existed? What problems will remain solved after I'm gone? These questions shift your focus from short-term wins to long-term impact. And long-term impact rearranges your priorities. Most people live for the immediate pleasure, immediate validation, immediate status. Billionaire thinkers live for the long tail, the period of life that extends beyond their physical participation. They build systems, institutions, companies, intellectual property, frameworks, philosophies, assets and opportunities that continue to produce value without them being present. That is the difference between income and legacy. Income feeds you, legacy feeds others. Legacy is not always public. It doesn't require fame. It doesn't require applause. It doesn't require the world to chant your name. Legacy often happens quietly, in the child whose confidence you shaped, in the team you empowered, in the ideas you shared, in the problems you solved, and in the structures you built. The world rarely recognizes legacy immediately, but it recognizes its effects eventually. Billionaire thinkers are comfortable with delayed recognition because they are playing a longer game than visibility. Building a life that outlasts you also requires thinking generationally. Most people think in terms of their lifetime. Billionaire thinkers think in terms of multiple lifetimes. They make decisions that their children, their community, or their industry will benefit from long after they're gone. They invest in education instead of entertainment, in assets instead of appearances, in infrastructure instead of indulgence. They plant trees knowing they will never sit in all the shade they create. But generational thinking isn't only financial, it's cultural, it's intellectual, it's behavioral. What beliefs are you passing on? What standards? What disciplines? What values? A child who grows up seeing delayed gratification learns a habit that compounds. A team that grows up seeing excellence learns a standard that compounds. A community that grows up seeing resilience learns a culture that compounds. Money can be lost. Values can be inherited. Billionaire thinkers also understand that impact multiplies through teaching. When you teach someone something useful, a skill, a framework, a way of thinking, that knowledge continues traveling long after you stop actively sharing it. A single idea can outlive the person who spoke it. A single insight can change the trajectory of another person's life. Ideas are the most durable assets humans produce. They transcend borders, generations and circumstances. To build a life that outlasts you is to distribute your ideas widely and generously. Legacy also requires intentional subtraction. To create something that lasts, you have to strip away the things that don't. You have to remove distractions that dilute your purpose. You have to simplify. You have to choose direction over chaos. The clearer your mission, the easier it becomes to align action, resources and people around it. Chapter 15. Never lose the broke mindset that got you here. One of the most surprising truths about wealth is that the mindset that creates it is often the opposite of the mindset people adopt once they achieve it. During the climb, people are resourceful, they are disciplined, they are deliberate, they stretch every dollar, every hour, every opportunity. They are hungry, they are curious, they are humble enough to learn, they are hungry enough to execute, they are frugal enough to reinvest. That is the broke mindset, and it is responsible for the rise. But once money arrives, many abandon the very habits that made success possible in the first place. And slowly, without noticing, comfort kills the drive that hunger built. Billionaire thinkers avoid this trap by preserving the broke mindset, even long after they have the financial means to behave differently. Acting broke when you are broke is survival. Acting broke when you are wealthy is strategy. It is how you remain creative, disciplined and grounded. It is how you protect yourself from lifestyle inflation, ego-driven decisions, and wasteful spending. The broke mindset is less about poverty and more about approach. It is about optimizing instead of overspending. It is about solving problems instead of outsourcing everything. It is about refusing complacency. When you have no money, you learn to build with constraints. Constraints force innovation. They force negotiation. They force experimentation. Constraints sharpen your thinking and strengthen your execution. Many successful founders credit their lack of resources as the reason they learned leverage. When you can't throw money at problems, you throw creativity at them. You throw relationships at them. You throw patience and ingenuity at them. These are the muscles that generate wealth, and those muscles atrophy when people upgrade to convenience too quickly. The broke mindset also protects you from the trap of validation. When people start winning, they feel pressure to display their success. Nicer cars, bigger houses, designer brands, luxury experiences. None of these things are inherently negative, but when they become proof instead of preference, they become liabilities. Validation spending is the quickest way to convert financial achievement into financial vulnerability. Billionaire thinkers don't spend to impress, they spend to enhance. They don't chase applause, they chase advantage. Acting broke also means maintaining a bias for resourcefulness. Resourceful people ask, how can I do this better for less? Who knows what I don't? What is the most efficient path? Resourceful thinking compounds because it prioritizes optimization. People who lose the broke mindset default to convenience. Just pay someone to do it. Just upgrade it. Just replace it. Just outsource it. Excessive convenience is dangerous. It slowly transfers control away from you, and control is one of the foundational assets in wealth creation. There's also a psychological element. Comfort is seductive. Comfort makes you less aggressive, less curious, less observant, and less prepared. Comfort removes urgency. It delays action. It weakens resilience. When everything is easy, your tolerance for difficulty shrinks. Then when life inevitably brings challenges, economic downturns, market shifts, new competition, changing technology, comfort becomes a liability. The broke mindset keeps you mentally sharp, in a way wealth alone never will. Another benefit of the broke mindset is humility. When you remember what it felt like to have nothing, you treat opportunities with respect. You treat money with respect. You treat people with respect. You avoid entitlement. Entitlement kills more potential than failure ever did. The moment someone believes they are owed success, owed applause, owed loyalty, or owed relevance, they decline. Billionaire thinkers keep the humility that scarcity taught them. They keep learning. They keep asking questions. They keep training. They keep improving. They never assume they've arrived. But the broke mindset must evolve as you rise. It is not about staying small. It is not about rejecting growth. It is not about refusing to invest. It is about remembering the principles that created momentum and applying them at higher levels. For example, frugality at the bottom means cutting unnecessary spending. Frugality at the top means allocating capital wisely. Hustle at the bottom means doing the work yourself. Hustle at the top means building teams who can scale that work beyond you. Curiosity at the bottom means learning fundamentals. Curiosity at the top means staying ahead of trends and threats. The mindset evolves, but the foundation remains. Never losing the broke mindset also means never losing the ability to do without. The ability to do without debt. The ability to do without luxury. The ability to do without validation. When you can live below your means, even when your means are large, you gain leverage. you gain optionality, you gain freedom, you gain time. The people who look rich are often trapped by their expenses. The people who act broke are often free. In the end, wealth is not just about money, it's about behavior, and behavior is shaped by mindset. The mindset that builds wealth is rare because it requires discomfort, restraint, patience, humility, and delayed gratification. If you abandon that mindset, the moment comfort becomes accessible, you will eventually return to the conditions that forced you to learn it in the first place. Keep the mindset, keep the hunger, keep the respect for money, keep the discipline, keep the humility. That is how you ensure not only that you rise, but that you stay up. Conclusion. Thinking like a billionaire and acting like you're broke is a paradox on the surface. But once you've lived inside the idea for a while, it stops being a contradiction and becomes a formula. Billionaire thinking expands your vision, stretches your time horizon, refines your decision-making, and challenges how you measure progress. Acting broke grounds you in humility, efficiency, discipline, and resourcefulness. One creates acceleration, the other creates durability. Together they create a kind of success that can survive volatility, temptation, ego, and time. Everything in this audiobook has pointed to a simple truth. Wealth is not earned in a moment. Wealth is earned through mindset, behavior, and structure, repeated over years. It is built quietly before it becomes visible. It is built privately before it becomes public. It is built internally before it becomes external. If you focus only on outcomes, you will miss the process. If you focus on the process, the outcomes will eventually become inevitable. Your future will be shaped by how you think about time, money, relationships, value, leverage, discipline, and opportunity. You have seen how long-term thinking beats short-term gratification, how humility beats ego, how curiosity beats boredom, how systems beat sweat, how frugality beats lifestyle inflation, how asymmetric bets beat cautious stagnation, how time protection beats busyness, how compounding relationships beat transactional networking, how value beats vanity, how resilience beats rejection, how invisible work beats visible posturing, how multiple income engines beat single dependency, how strategic focus beats stubborn persistence, and how legacy thinking beats consumption-driven comfort. These ideas are not motivational slogans, they are operating principles. But none of these principles matter if they stay intellectual. The wealthy do not merely understand how wealth works, they behave in alignment with it. They don't wait for the perfect time, they don't wait for approval, they don't wait for guarantees. They apply the mindset and let compounding do the rest. If there is one habit worth developing above all, it is the habit of applying insights instead of simply collecting them. Knowledge unacted upon becomes decoration. Knowledge acted upon becomes transformation. The greatest threat to building a richer life is not failure, it is drift. Drifting happens when you respond to life instead of directing life. When you follow convenience instead of intention, when you live by comparison instead of contribution. Thinking like a billionaire is an antidote to drift because it forces you to choose what matters, to choose how you invest your time, to choose how you allocate your resources, to choose what you build, to choose where you're going and why. If the broke mindset taught anything, it's that hunger is powerful. Hunger moves people. Hunger sharpens focus. Hunger builds resilience. But hunger doesn't have to disappear when conditions improve. You don't have to wait for struggle to behave like a builder. You don't have to wait for scarcity to behave with discipline. You don't have to wait for failure to behave with humility. You can preserve the mindset without preserving the hardship. That is the evolution. That is the goal. Where you go from here is up to you. You now understand the architecture. You now understand the psychology. You now understand the strategic behaviors that separate those who get ahead from those who remain stuck. The concepts are simple, but simplicity is not weakness. Simplicity is clarity. Complexity confuses. Simplicity compounds. In the end, wealth is freedom. Freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom of direction, freedom of expression, freedom from fear, freedom from desperation, freedom from dependency. Thinking like a billionaire will show you how to build that freedom. Acting like you're broke will make sure you keep it. The next decade of your life will reflect the mindset you adopt today. Choose the one that compounds. Choose the one that lasts. Choose the one that builds a life worth living and one worth leaving behind.